Elliot Tepper is the founder of really a phenomenon that has occurred over the last several years called Betel. Betel is a Spanish version of Bethel, which in Hebrew, Betel means house of God. It's a ministry that is worldwide now with a major focus on Europe. And it's a fascinating story of someone who saw the need of the broken, especially people on the streets in Madrid, Spain, and decided to do something about it. Next thing you know, you have a worldwide movement going on. Is it? Welcome, Elliot. First of all.
Thank you, Jim.
Is it close to the truth to call it a movement? Would you call it a movement?
A movement in a living sense. Yes, that God is in the midst, and He's growing, and we're growing with Him.
Before we talk about its genesis, you're in how many countries now?
We're in 21 nations, about 80 urban areas of the world, 22 provinces of Spain.
And how would you describe the ministry? Is it rehab, or is it more than rehab?
It's much more than rehab. We're a WEC ministry, Worldwide Evangelization for Christ ministry. Right. We started as church planners in Madrid. We're still church planners, but the thrust of our church planning is a mercy ministry, a social ministry. We help the outcasts, the marginalized. We call them the marginados. And we help alcoholics, drug addicts, homeless, single mothers, immigrants. But most of the people have their problems centered in drug addiction, which creates the other problem.
Right. Now, I want to get back to that, but let's go even further back. You started out as a independent missionary to Mexico.
Right.
And as I was reading a book about your story, I mean, you basically felt the Lord calling you to Mexico as a young guy with your wife, and you just went there without any really deep pockets or anyone supporting you. You're just trusting the Lord. Mm-hmm. It was a pretty raw experience.
Yeah, I mean, I come from a Jewish home. I'm the first Christian in my family, right. And I had an experience at 25 years of age. I was at Harvard University, had a vision of heaven and hell and a dramatic conversion experience, and ended up within a few years as an independent missionary in Mexico preaching the gospel. I was teaching economics at the University of the Americas in Cholula, Puebla, and God raised up a work among the students and the faculty and staff of the University of the Americas. Very successful work. And then God called us from there to Spain, and we tried to do the same thing in Madrid at the Universidad Complutense of Madrid and Universidad de Alcalá. But the university people didn't pay any attention to us like they did in Mexico, and the drug addicts and alcoholics drew near and asked for help. And so we went to the people God, gave us. And then after helping one addict, another, taking a flat, then a farm, and then another farm, and another property. Today we have about 350 properties in the world in 80-some cities, and we've helped over 140,000 people. Mm. And we've started, 40 churches and have dozens and dozens of embryonic churches around the world.
Now, what fascinates me about your story is, as I was reading about the current success, I was so impressed by its growth, and obviously you've created a model of ministry here that really, really works. But back in those early days in Mexico, you were really grinding it out. I mean, you were trusting the Lord for everything from gasoline for your car to food on the table. Your wife, Mary, at times was more than distraught at what was going on. Did you see the Lord somehow bonding with you at that time, kind of demonstrating to you what it meant to rely on Him? Was He preparing you for what was to come?
Absolutely. We learned the life of faith, in Mexico. We learned that, that God is supernatural, that if He calls you, He provides. And we had to, just walk every day, trust. There were times we had no money, no food. I mean, there's one famous incident when we were sitting in our apartment in Cholula, and we'd gone to the post office, no money in the post office, no letters. And we sat down, cried, no gasoline for the car, no food for the kids. And Mary said, I just can't go on anymore. We're crying. And suddenly a letter came right through the window, and the postman had forgotten to drop the letter off. It was a large gift from the Church of the Risen Savior in Pittsburgh.
I think you mentioned it was $250, which was a huge amount at that time.
Yeah, it was actually $450.
$450,
yeah.
Okay. Well,
and I went and cashed it, and then I dropped my wallet in the street after I cashed it. And a man came up the street and handed my wallet back to me. And that was a demonstration that God really was watching over us.
This letter flew in through the window.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the postman threw it in because he forgot to deliver it earlier.
Oh, okay, so he threw it through the window. timing, huh?
Yeah.
What did that do for you?
Well, it just confirmed that God is God, that He's sovereign, that He's aware, He loves us. And I mean, it's still not easy to trust God, but it's, the spirit of faith is real. And if you're humble and obedient, and you don't move in presumption, but you move in faith, God will provide.
And the same principle of dependence on the Lord applies when you're overseeing 350 properties in all these countries,
Yeah.
and as applied depending on the Lord for food in Mexico.
Nothing changes, just the more zeros after the number.
Just more zeros.
More
yeah.
zeros, that's
yeah,
all.
Yeah, but the principle of dependence remains the same. So you started working with the marginalized,
Right.
kind of by default?
Yeah, we were going after the elite. I'm an economist from Harvard and Cambridge University, Lehigh University, and I wanted to reach those kind of people, and God gave us some success with university people. But Europe was post-Christian, and Spain was just entering the European common market, European community. They were prospering. They didn't need God. They had everything. But there was a group of people that had a need, and the greatest need that people have is to know they have a need. And so these people came to us. They saw our literature, and we didn't have anything to offer them, so we sent them to Teen Challenge. Teen Challenge closed down. We were forced to start our own first program in Madrid, and more came. We won a gang leader. We won some principal people, and then it was God. It was an explosive time. We met a social need that the government couldn't meet. At that time, there was no social safety net in Spain. AIDS was exploding. People were dying continually. No one knew what to do with AIDS, and so the people were full of the fear of God, and fear of death, and they came to us and found Christ.
In fact, in the book, the authors mentioned that at that time, in those early days, about 75%, that's what I recall reading, of the people you were working with off the streets were HIV positive.
Yeah, in the early days, it was figures that high. Dutch National Television did a documentary back in the 80s on Betel called Half the Church Has AIDS. And we went to people who were injecting heroin, and they were reckless. They had no idea what AIDS was back then. Of course, there's about a 10-year window. You get the AIDS virus and it's dormant. You don't know about it, and you contaminate everybody. And there was no medication other than there were a few things they used, but they weren't successful. The percentages dropped over time. In Western Europe, United States, it's gone way down. But in Russia, Eastern Europe, Bulgaria, India, the same plus 50% statistics apply.
Yeah, it's astonishing. Its prevalence rate in Southern Africa, where I work, and I'm just getting involved in India now, and it really is a pandemic. But let's talk a little bit about some of these people that you ministered to. In the book, there's some reference to various individuals. Tell me a story about one of these people that basically came from death unto life because of their exposure to Betel.